kick off because it's 102 or 103 now at this stage. Thank you so much for coming along. It's lovely to see you. Thank you, Louise and Kylie, for being so brave and having your cameras on. I'm a big fan of cameras on because otherwise it's just me talking to an empty room. So I really, really appreciate that. And look, everyone else, if you're not in your pajamas or if you're not having a glass of beer, have your cameras on. No judgment. Even if look, you are in your pajamas, it doesn't really matter. If you're having your lunch, that's all good too. We can see your creativity as long as it's not white bread sandwiches with cheese. We don't want to see that. Hey, listen, thank you again for coming on. My name is Cillín, Cillín Hearns. I'm a leadership and performance coach. And I'd really love to extend my thanks to Momentum Recruitment for putting this on for us all, because we're in the middle of changing times now, aren't we? Hey, Steve. We're in the middle of changing times, and there's quite a lot of uncertainty, especially in the work front. And until the government really decides on what it's doing, things might change up for a really while. So we wanted to talk about resilience and maybe share with you a couple of tools around resilience, just to help you think about things in a different way, just to get you through if you're worried or concerned about anything at all. Now, before we can talk about resilience, we have to talk about stress, because if it wasn't for stress, we wouldn't need resilience, right? Everything would just be perfectly fine on Dory. And in order for us to understand stress fully, it's really important for us to start on our nervous system, on how it actually kicks in and the different parts of it, and then what we can do to maybe tame those parts of it if they start to get a little bit overbearing or start to take over. Because as we know, stress is really important. It's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. The challenge comes when it kind of takes over and it starts to dominate, leading to resourceful emotions or unresourceful thoughts or behaviors that kind of just get in the way and prevent us from moving forward in a positive way. So parts of the nervous system that we're talking about are the autonomic nervous system. It largely looks after stress. So the autonomic nervous system, I think of it as automatic because it kind of just kicks in all by itself. Now, when we think about the autonomic nervous system, there are three parts to it. The first part is the sympathetic nervous response, which is, I have a coat on my hand, by the way. Things popped up, I just saw it there. It's the sympathetic nervous response, which is your fight or flight. So when we think about sympathetic nervous response, what happens in the body? What happens to our heart rate? Does it increase or decrease? But it goes up, That's exactly it. So the heart rate increases, blood pressure, it goes up as well, right? Breathing rate goes up. So everything goes up, and it's getting us ready for fighting whatever it is that's coming away or running away from it. And so it pushes, the heart rate goes up, takes the blood away from the essential organs and pushes it out to our extremities, to our muscles, to give us that chance for dealing with whatever the physical threat is in that moment. Now, the flip side of the sympathetic nervous response is the parasympathetic nervous response, or the rest and digest response. And that takes everything back down again. So our heart rates decrease, our breathing rates decrease, our blood pressure decreases, and the blood isn't pushed out to the muscles, it's kept in around the vital organs to allow it to do its job and just process the essentials that the body needs, right, to function. Now, this shunting of the blood and the shunting of resources is important, and we're going to talk about why it's important later on. Now, the third part of the autonomic nervous system, the lesser known part, is called the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is the largest of the 10 cranial nerves. So obviously it comes down out of our cranium, out of our brains, and it's called the vagus after vagrant, not after a Las Vegas. It's not the party nerve. It's vagrant, so it moves around the body, it touches on all the major organs of the body, and specifically it connects the central nervous system to our heart, our lungs, and our stomach. That's why when we get nervous, we get the butterflies in our stomach. It's our vagus nerve that has been stimulated, and that's what causes those feelings. Now we're going to talk about those three and how they interact within the body and what we can do to kind of control it and to manage stress in a better way. Does that make sense so far? Yep. Nods, tongues. Okay, fantastic. Okay. So very quickly, you can shout this out or you can jot it into chat. What causes stress? What causes stress? causes stress? Up into the chat there. What do you think?
Uncertainty and pressure.
Uncertainty and pressure. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Sign of the times at the moment, Kylie. Yep. Good. Conflict, Debbie. That's right. Conflict. Time pressure, Louise. Yes, thank you. Good. So uncertainty, pressure, conflict, time pressure. Children, kids. Kids cause stress. Yep. Change causes stress. Very good. Very good. Ailing parents might cause stress, fear, Karen. Very good. Money, Louise. I'm having too much money. I know it's very, very stressful. Absolutely, money causes stress. People interactions, very good. Yes, in fact, people are the biggest, other people, of course, other people are the biggest cause of stress in our lives, believe it or not. Yeah, that's you're right. Very good, very good. So we have uncertainty, we have conflict, we have time pressure, we have change, we have fear, we have money, we have people interactions, all these things. Very, very good. Archibald, so overwhelmed by too many things to do or how to do them, like that overwhelming feeling. It's all just too much. Nice, very nice. So I'm just going to share a wee little story. It's a bit of a personal story, and Louise, I'm gonna share that time years ago. I don't know if you know Louise. So Louise and I, we've known each other for quite a while, and you probably don't know it's about Louise, but she loves to fish. And she's got this little boat. Now, it's big enough for about two people. It's comfortable enough for two people, but not much more than that, right? And I think it was about 2 years ago, just around Christmas time, about 2 years ago. Louise and I were out in Wellington Harbour, and we're having a great time chatting and fishing away. Now, Louise and I were pretty tough, right? So we weren't wearing any life jackets. It was a beautiful day. Anyway, the sea was calm. But then, all of a sudden, this freak wave comes out of nowhere, and it hits the boat on the side that tips us over, and we both splash into the water. Now, we pop up out of the water at around the same time, and Louise is looking around, and she's laughing her head off, and she sees me. I'm scrambling to the edge of the boat, and I managed to reach it, and I'm holding on. And she takes one look at my face, and she says, Cillín, you just stay with the boat. We're not far out. I'm going to swim in and get some help. And off she goes. And as she's swimming away, she's thinking to herself, oh, hilarious. The look on Cillín's face. I can't wait to tell people about this after. In the meantime, I'm hanging on to the edge of the boat, and I'm thinking, I can't believe she left me. I can't believe she swam off and left me. And so I'm in this cookout. Not a bad place to end up. So I'm hanging on to the edge of the boat. I'm white knuckled at this stage. And I'm noticing that I'm starting to drift out further and further and further out into the open water. And then I see this shadow on the water. And I go, oh my God, I'm the shark. I'm in that shadow. I'm going to get eaten. I'm going to get eaten. I'm going to start to shake. I'm thinking of hypothermia. What is it? Why is it that Louise and myself find ourselves in exactly the same position at exactly the same time? Louise is perfectly fine. But me, I'm about to lose my life. What is it in that situation that Louise has got? Or what is it that Louise is doing that is very different to me? What do we think? Because we're in exactly the same position at exactly the same time, circumstances are exactly the same. Why is Louise perfectly fine and I'm stressed out of my mind? Very good, Louise. Absolutely. So you might have had experiences in the past and you've built up some kind of knowledge about how to deal with these situations. Very, very good. So it's not new. Your brain already have a map or a way of dealing with it. Cool-headed approach to the problem. Very good, Archibald. Very good. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. A different perspective on situations. You're absolutely right there. So you guys are on the right track. So first of all, there are two things that are really important to think about here. First of all, Louise has a skill set that she can rely on in that situation. She can swim. So in this situation, we're in the water. So the important skill is to be able to swim. I can't swim. So I am pretty much out of options. My options are very, very limited. Louise, she's right. She can backstroke, she can swim in, she can come back, she can do whatever she wants. She can swim around the boat, tease me a little bit. She can do whatever she wants. She has the skill to deal with that situation. So here's the thing I want you to take just 2 moments to think about. What are the things in your life that consistently show up for you that cause you stress? What are the things in your life that consistently show up for you that cause you stress? Is it the money stuff? Is it people interactions? Is it fear? Fear of what in particular? What about change? What is it about change that causes you stress? Uncertainty. What is it about that that causes you stress? And ask yourself, if this does cause me stress, what skill can I learn to be able to better deal with this thing? Then go and learn that skill and put it into practice. Stress goes away. Stress goes away. Fear of not meeting people's expectations. Yeah, that's another one. The unknown and not expecting too much to do. Yep, not enough time in the day. So maybe time management skills, maybe priority skills, maybe the ability to have the conversation to explain the list of stuff that you've got going on and help your boss or your demanding stakeholders, giving them some insight into where your time has to go, what you might have to put on the back burner and why. Good. So that's the first thing. What is the one skill that you need to develop in order to make that stress go away? The second thing, and you guys nailed it in the chat earlier on when I asked that question, is Louise is thinking about things differently. She's very future focused and she's focused on the positive. When I get back, and later on, we're going to talk about this, I'm going to laugh about it later. It's like her mindset is very different, whereas mine is going to some dark places, isn't it? I mean, I'm going to get hypothermia. I'm going to drift off into the open ocean. I'm going to get eaten by a shark. And if it's not a shark, it's going to be by an orca. You know, I mean, they call them killer whales for a reason. And I know people think it's because they killed dolphins and sharks and other whales. But the reality is they've never probably found a human body in the wild that's been attacked by a killer whale. Have you seen the size? So my mind is going crazy places, right? It might even seem you're going under the fringes of reality here. But isn't that what we do under times of stress, under intense stress? Our minds just spiral down. So isn't it also true that if I have the ability to freeze frame my thoughts, to recognize that I'm spiraling down, and to change my thinking, it's going to have a different impact on my physiology? Because in reality, if I imagine a scenario happening really intensely, and I imagine myself in that situation and all these nasty things happening to me in great detail, big visual images, of course my body is going to respond. Of course it is, 100%. And that's a common pattern that people who struggle with anxiety actually do. Might not be aware of it until we start breaking it down, but at an unconscious level, what tends to happen is we imagined a time in the future, so anxiety is temporal, it's got a time component to it. We imagine things happening in the future, and they're never great things about how it's all going to work out and it's going to be just fine. It's always the worst case scenario. And then they transport themselves into that situation as if they're experiencing it now. And they tend to make it big and bold right up here, and big imagery and detail with a lot of color. And when we do that, our body has no choice but to respond. And that's when we might start feeling those feelings of anxiety or fear, or then we start questioning ourselves and our minds start to turn over and spiral down. And it kind of just gets worse and worse and worse. It builds and builds and builds. Does that kind of make sense so far? Yeah. So largely it has to do with our thoughts, what we tend to focus on, and our skill set for dealing with things in the moment. So earlier on, I asked that question, what causes stress? So let me re-ask that question. What causes stress? Perspective and mindset. Very good, Kylie. So the short answer to that is we do. We cause stress. All stress is, and I don't want to minimize it by saying all stress is, because I know I've experienced stress and it's a terrible place to be in when we're in it. But if we were to take a cold-hearted, disassociated view of it, all stress is a relationship between you and your environment. It's how we're interpreting events that are happening to us or may happen to us. that cause us to have those stress responses. So all stress is, it's a really important point, folks. All stress is the relationship between you and your environment. It's how you're interpreting the meaning that you're putting on things in your environment. If we change the meaning, change the interpretation, reframe it, look at it in a different way. I'm not talking in a Pollyanna kind of way, oh, it'll be fine, losing my job, oh, it'll be okay. People will come knocking on my door anytime now. I'm not talking about that ridiculous Pollyanna stuff. I'm talking about, so this is the situation. I don't want to make it bigger, catastrophize it bigger than it actually is, or I don't want to minimize it. You know, because, it'll be fine, you'll be fine. I don't want to do that either. I want to see it as it actually is. And then I'm going to pull all of my resources, all of my knowledge, all of my experiences, all of the relationships that I have out there, and to draw on all those, and I'm going to make the thing the way I want it to be. So I'm going to really tap into what are the things I can do in reality now to make this situation the way I want it to be. And I'm going to go hard at that. And that's going to start, to get the ball rolling. It's going to start changing how you're feeling, because now you're taking action and you're creating the future that you want. At least you're taking those first few steps. So all stress is a relationship between the environment and you. And I just want to read this out just in case you don't believe me. So this comes from a book called Health Psychology, Linda Brandon and Jess Feist in their book, Health Psychology State. Neither the environmental event nor the person's response define stress. Rather, the individual's perception of the psychological situation is a critical factor. Let me give that to you again. The individual's perception of the psychological situation is a critical factor. This perception includes potential harm, threats, and challenges, as well as the individual's perceived ability to cope with them. So those three things, again, the perception includes the potential harm, threats, and challenges, as well as the individual's perceived ability to cope with. Okay? So even if I'm in that situation where I can't swim and my options are limited, if I were to able to change my thinking to be, you know what, Louise is right, we're not that far out. She's going to be back in half an hour or so. It's midsummer. I can float around here for a long time without getting hypothermia. And I'm in the harbour. Boaties are travelling back and forth all the time. If Louise doesn't come back in the next half hour, someone else is going to stop me. I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to stay here and hang on. It'll all be good. So far, so good, folks? Any questions at this point? You can pop through the chat, or you can sing them out. Or you could just ask not to sing. Okay, let's keep cracking on. I'm mindful we've only got the hour. So whenever we enter into a situation, whether it's new or whether it's familiar, our brains always go with three questions. And again, this is an unconscious thing. The first question is, what does this mean to me? That's what it means. That's the first question. So what does this mean to me? What is this environment situation? If it's new, what does it mean to me? Right? So if you walk into a familiar environment, you know what to do and how to act, then that's perfectly fine, because the next question is, can I control or cope with this? If the answer to that is, yeah, I've got skills, I'm perfectly fine, I'm comfortable in this new situation. I might, a networking event, everyone gets the heebie-jeebies when they go to a networking event. But like we said, if you've got the experience of these situations, you kind of get a better idea about how to roll with it, right? So what does it mean to me is the first question. Second question is, can I control or cope with this? So Louise and I fall into the water at exactly the same time. What does it mean to me? For Louise, it's fine. I can swim. I'll be back. For me, I have no options. I'm going to potentially die if I don't hang on to the edge of the boat. Can I control or cope with this? Louise can. No problem. Me, I can't. And then we go to the next question, which is the situation better or worse? As Louise is taking action and moving towards a goal, a positive goal, then it's making the situation better. So it's going to reduce any initial feelings of anxiety or stress, right? Me, well, my thoughts process of spinning down. Can I control or cope with this? No, I'm going to get eaten by a shark. I'm going to drift out. I'm going to have hypothermia. Is it making the situation better or worse? In my mind, it's making it worse. And then it goes around to the first question. What does this mean? Can I control or cope with it? And that's the spiral that we go down. Or we can spiral up, up, up. Even if we don't have the skill, we can control our thinking, lessen the impact of what we might feel. So those three questions. Again to you once again. What does it mean to me? Can I control or cope with it? And then, is the situation better or worse? Are your three questions. We're doing this at an unconscious level all the time. Okay. Now, I wanted to very quickly throw some hormones at you. We can't talk about stress without talking about hormones. So what are the three major hormones that are involved in the stress response? Can anyone remember? Three big ones, the heavy hitters. Cortisol. Well done, Ted. Very good. That's one of the big ones, probably the most important one. Adrenaline, Louise, spot on, very good. And there's a third one, which is kind of, it does the same thing as adrenaline, but it's a lesser known one until I give you this clue. When someone has an allergic reaction to a bee sting, maybe, they've got an allergy to a bee sting, and they've got a pin that they jab into their arm or their leg. What's that called? Really brightening the way, originally brightening the answer. It's an EpiPen. Yes, exactly. Well done, Louise. It's an EpiPen. So epinephrine, right? That's what we get when we shove an EpiPen into our arm or leg. We get a burst of epinephrine, and it's acts in a similar way as adrenaline, right? So it gives us that extra energy. So norepinephrine. Very good, Martin. Norepinephrine is so noradrenaline, norepinephrine. They're hormones, but for the brain, so slightly different. Epinephrine and adrenaline in the body, norepinephrine and noradrenaline in the brain, right? But absolutely, Martin, spot on. It's good to see you, by the way. I believe you moved to Australia. That's a long way to go. Okay, so when our bodies are pumped full of these hormones, adrenaline and epinephrine are the first ones that hit us, and that gives us that burst of energy, right? So it's like your daughter jumps out from behind the door and goes boom, and it's that sudden rush that you get. That's adrenaline and epinephrine forcing its way around your body, giving you that strength to fight off your 6-year-old child or to run away in fear. Now, the body is really good at absorbing those hormones, right? So when we're fighting or flighting, we naturally burn that stuff up, right? Now, the challenge that we've got is around the cortisol. Cortisol tends to linger a little longer. But let's talk about that and the impacts that cortisol or the longer lasting side of cortisol can have, because cortisol is an important hormone. We have it in our bodies right now. If you're sitting at your desk and you're feeling comfortable, you've probably got the right amount of cortisol pulsing through your veins, because it is involved in regulating the blood pressure. So if I get a burst of energy, my heart rate increases, my breathing rate increases, my blood pressure has to respond. So when we talk about blood pressure, what we're talking about is the force of the blood being pushed through our arteries. And as you know, our arteries expand and contract, expand and contract, expand and contract, depending on the pressure of the blood going through them. Cortisol moderates this. So when we're fighting or flighting, then obviously we need more cortisol to keep a better eye on it. Keep a better eye on the blood pressure, to make sure that the arteries and veins are expanding and contracting appropriately. Now, cortisol is also important in our sleep-wake cycles. The challenge occurs when we have too much cortisol in our systems and our bodies haven't had an opportunity to expel it. Because when we have too much cortisol in our systems, then our blood pressure is going to be out of whack. It's going to start impacting our sleep-wake cycles, which enhances our levels of stress. Sleep is really, really important for monitoring and managing stress. So we get into this nasty spiral. So it's really important that we introduce strategies, if you like, longer-term strategies, habits, really, daily habits, lifestyle choices that forces us to reduce levels of cortisol, reduce those hormone stress levels in our body to an acceptable level, to allow us just to get on and do what we would normally do. The other challenge of having excessive cortisol in our systems is that our bodies think we're still under stress. Therefore, it channels resources away from the essentials to deal with that stress. So our immune system is impacted. We produce less white blood cells. We produce less T cells to fight infection. So we're kind of exposing ourselves to bacteria and viruses and anything else in our environment that might just be getting in there, right? Now, normally, if we're calm and relaxed, our bodies are fighting off these bacteria and viruses all the time, right? It's we've built up millions of years of T cells and white blood cells to counter all these bacteria. New stuff might need a little bit of help with, right? But when our resources are diverted and our ability of our immune system is dipped, that's when we can start to get sick, coughs, colds, flus, things like that, right? So that's one impact of excessive cortisol over a period of time. The other impact, of course, is the ability to break down those good fats and bad fats. So HDLs, high density lipoproteins, low density lipoproteins. Our bodies, under normal circumstances, they're pretty good at breaking that stuff down and getting rid of it or putting it where it needs to be. But excessive cortisol doesn't do the job so well. So what happens to those bad fats when we have excessive levels of cortisol in our systems for a period of time? What tends to happen to those fats? Yeah, to compromise health, sure, to clog arteries. And that's the big one, Louise. You're absolutely right. So what tends to happen is those fats, they get pushed around the body and eventually they just kind of get deposited in the arteries and specifically in the arterioles. So those smaller arteries around our hearts. Now, why this is a problem is because over time they start to calcify. And so they become hard. And so if we've got even a section of our arteriole that is calcified, and then, your 6-year-old daughter jumps out from behind the door, goes, "Boo," your heart rate elevates, the blood is pumped through, but the artery can't expand and contract the way it would because it's more solid. It can either cause a blockage, for sure, or it can just chip off one of the calcifications and it gets caught up in the bloodstream and it flows around and around and around until it gets to the narrowest arteries, which tend to be in our brains, and it gets stuck. And when that happens, it's a stroke. Right? So we might get a myocardial infarction where the blood is just literally blocked, and then our heart just goes, heart attack, or that piece is broken off and is pushed around and it gets stuck in our brain and it impedes the blood flow there, and it can have, obviously, severe impacts. And that is exactly what happened to my older brother last year. He lives in Japan, lived there forever. He had a real playboy lifestyle, he just loads of money, he's expat, living it up, maybe drinking too much, maybe eating too much, not worried about sleep, not worried about exercise. Weight, big guy, right? And over the last few years, he's met a beautiful woman. They've got 2 kids. And he recognized he started to need to change his lifestyle, but he never got out of his habit of working ridiculous hours, poor sleep, not looking after himself, right? Until about a little over a year ago. So he started to walk, started to run. I'm really sorry to hear that, Archibald. Really sorry to hear that. My older brother is luckier in that he's recovered now, thank goodness. But Liam, he started to run and then he started to do some HIIT training, a high intensity exercise stuff. And basically what happened was he finished one of his HIIT sessions and about 15 minutes later, he went blind. He literally lost his sight for about 60 seconds. That's a long time. I can only imagine what must be going through his mind at that time. I can't see. In a slight return, and he went and he got checked up, and sure enough, it was a stroke. But it's all cleared now, and he's perfectly fine. And since then, he has absolutely made lifestyle changes. Now he's lost over 30 kilos in a very short period of time. Probably a little bit too much if you ask me in such a short time. But his health is perfectly fine now, and he's lost a lot of weight. And he's much more conscious of what he eats and how he exercises and his sleep and the whole health side of things. Thank goodness. But these are the kind of things that can happen. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen the day after. But over a lifestyle of just abusing ourselves, of not making the right choices for what we put into our systems, not sleeping well enough, not exercising, giving our heart and lungs the exercise it needs, not giving our muscles. Our bodies will do its very best, but can't keep going forever and ever and ever if we keep abusing it over time. And it's going to have consequences. So these are the kind of the downsides of not monitoring us or not looking after ourselves, not, I suppose we could use that term, flattening the curve of our stress response, because when it gets too much, that's when the danger starts to occur, when we start to crash, right? So stress is a normal part of life, but we also need to have lifestyle factors in place so that our stress drops down again, comes up and it drops down again. Our body's well able to handle that stuff. So far, so good. I've scared you a little bit. I don't mean to. So let's talk about some of those strategies, right? Some of those lifestyle strategies, things that you can put into place straight away today and start to feel the benefits. Now, it takes about 2 weeks of introducing new habits to start to feel the benefits. And that's not a long time. And hopefully over time, you build up that habit and it will just, improve the quality of your life. So that's what we're talking about here, right? Improving the overall quality of our lives. So the first thing and the obvious thing is exercise. We talk about exercise all the time and how important it is to us, but a lot of us have this mindset, I'll get to it later. I'm too busy. My older brother was too busy, but he's not too busy now, right? And that's the thing, that the whole urgent and important side of things. We recognize that it's important, but it's not essentially urgent because I'm fine. I can still get out of bed, and I can still go to work, and I can still pay my bills, and I can still do what I need to do. Therefore, I'm going to put it on the long finger until it becomes urgent and important. And now the other things the things that you couldn't find time for, it's absolutely your priority. So why exercise is so important from a physiological point of view is it's good for our muscles, it's good for our body, it's good for our brain. It reduces all these good endorphins for our brain, makes us feel good. And it also is the most efficient way of reducing levels of cortisol, reducing excessive levels of cortisol in our system. Because the best way of getting rid of excessive cortisol is through our body fluids. Right? So if we're sweating it out, we're breathing it out, we're crying, we're expelling it in some way. That is the quickest and best way of reducing levels of cortisol through exercise. So make exercise. And I'm not talking about just going for a stroll around the park. That's fine. We call that walking. Exercise is a little bit different, right? We want to get the heart going. We want to increase increase our pulse rate. We want to get it up there, our breathing rate. We should be breaking into a mild sweat, pushing our bodies just a little bit more than we're used to. Now we're exercising, we're going to have the physiological benefits come along over time. The other thing that's really super essential, and I probably should have started off with this because it is the most important thing when managing stress levels, and that is sleep. If there is any challenges that you've got either in your physical body or in your mind, any mental issues or mood disorders or anything, sleep. You must get levels of sleep because anyone, even with, OCD or, anxiety or depression, it's always worse when we don't have enough sleep. It's always better when we have had a good night's sleep. Always. There are so many benefits to sleep, and there's so many dangers of not getting enough sleep. It's unbelievable. Sleep even impacts on our food choices. Because when we don't get enough sleep, and we'll talk about what enough sleep is now, and I know you might think, oh, well, for me, I only need this amount. You're lying to yourself, man. Don't kid yourself. The research, you can't deny it anymore. The research around sleep is just undeniable. So let's get back to the hunger thing, right? So when you don't get enough sleep, your body produces more ghrelin. That's another hormone, and it makes us hungrier. And not only does it make us hungrier, it makes us go for those poor food choices because we just want to get that sugar into our systems. So we go for the chocolate bars, we go for the cakes, we go for the treats. So it influences what we eat. And of course, that's going to impact us in the long term in terms of our energy throughout the day and also our body composition, all that stuff. But when we get enough sleep, our body produces a different kind of hormone called leptin. And what leptin does is it gives us a more satiated feeling. We're hungry less often and less intensely, right? And therefore, we tend to make better food choices. So it's better for our energy levels over time and for our body composition and overall health in the long term. That's just one aspect of it. Another thing to think about is they've done tests on people who would sleep maybe 6 hours sleep a night. And I can't remember if it's just after one night or after a week, but it's not much more than that. They've done tests on their responsiveness, their reaction times. And then they've compared that with people who have down a 6-pack of beer. And believe it or not, they are almost identical, statistically significantly identical. And so you've got, people who are sleep deprived, getting 6 hours sleep a night, thinking that they're perfectly fine, but they're not aware of their reaction time. So driving to work, for example, or making important decisions, it impacts that as well. Our recovery from injury, it impacts that as well. Our accuracy, either physical or even mental, it impacts everything. So the other thing about sleep and why it can't be shortchanged or there's no shortcut to it is physiologically what happens in the brain throughout the day. We're making decisions, we're having conversations, we're thinking, we're problem solving. Our brains need energy for this. Our brains only account for about 2% of our body weight, but use over 20% of the energy that is used for the body. So it's hungry for energy, right? So when it burns energy, it's every neuron has got a little cell, a little supporting nerve cell. It's called an astrocyte. An astrocyte does several things in the brain and nervous system, of course, but for our context, it holds a little sack of glycogen, a little sugary sack. And so when you're working through your day and processing stuff and problem solving, your neurons are drawing on that energy. And a byproduct of that is called adenosine. And it's when adenosine builds up in our brains to the extent where it kind of it's too much, that's when we start to get that real sleepy feeling where we just can't keep our eyes open or where adenosine is saturated. Now, the interesting thing about coffee, or caffeine in particular, is caffeine latches onto those adenosine receptors. So its molecule structure is kind of similar. So it latches onto those things. And that's why we feel awake when we have a cup of coffee, right? It's blocking the adenosine receptors. And so what's happening is the adenosine is building up in our brain, floating around. So we feel kind of awake. But then the caffeine breaks down. And as soon as those receptors become available, and the adenosine just attaches onto it, and all of a sudden, we're getting this slump in the afternoon. What do we go for? Another coffee. And what coffee does as well is it stimulates our adrenals, and then it produces adrenaline, and it gives us that surge of energy. So this is what's happening at a physiological level. But if you get enough sleep, and we're talking 8 hours, between 7.5 and 8.5, they reckon is the ideal. Any less than that, and you're not going to be as performant as you would like to be. You're not even going to be aware that you're not as performant, but the research tells us, and is extensive, you are not going to be as performant as you would like to be. And you can't shortchange this, because the adenosine, it takes 8 hours for the brain to flush it out. And also when we shortchange our sleep, and this is really important for our memory consolidation, is you've heard about REM sleep, REM, non-REM, deep sleep, all that stuff. So we go through cycles in our sleep. We have sleep stages. Now, REM, which is really important for memory and memory consolidation, 75% of REM activity occurs in the last 25% of our sleep. So if you're learning stuff, or if you're a knowledge worker and you've got to retain information, you've got to draw on that information, and you're not getting enough sleep, your brain isn't able to process all that information. And it's probably just going in and eventually out. It's not being stored appropriately. Sleep is really important. Folks, I could go on all day about sleep. Just get your sleep. 8 hours as best as you can. And I know life circumstances can get in the way of small children, for example, or at different stages in life, or injury, or things like that. But do your best. Sleep hygiene, really, really important. Okay. Breathing is another thing that's really, really important. I'm going to move on from this very, very quickly. Breathing is another thing that's really important, because when we focus on our out breath, take nice deep belly breaths, and focus on our out breath being 2 seconds longer than our in breath, That stimulates the vagus nerve. Remember that? Stimulates the vagus nerve to trigger the parasympathetic nervous response, the rest and digest part of our autonomic nervous system, to calm things down. When we're stressed or anxious, we tend to breathe higher in our chest, which causes the vagus nerve to stimulate the sympathetic response for us to be more on edge. So all it takes is a little trigger in our environment to set us over the edge. But when we belly breathe, when we focus on our out breath, we practice that, we're training our bodies, we're training our brains to be more calm, more calm. So we have a better base level to start off with. So breathing is really, really important. Talking to others, absolutely essential. Research definitely shows that people who have a large family network or a friend network that they tap into and share and discuss challenges that are going on for them have literally 50% less stress in their lives. Literally 50%. So when they say a problem shared is a problem halved, they're absolutely right. Right, so we have all the resources around us. I mean, a walk in nature without your phone, a 15-minute walk in nature without your phone will reduce your levels of stress by 50%. This is insane. Why are we doing more of this stuff? It is all within our control, right? Now, there might be times when those stress levels increase, and that's okay. Your body is designed to deal with it. What it's less designed for, and this is where the cortisol kind of hangs around, is when that stress never comes back down again. It's constant, and it's having that longer term impact on our bodies, an increase in inflammation and all sorts of stuff that I'm not going to go into now. Just don't have the time. So by being able to flatten those points, by being able to get out into nature, to have chats, to sit and breathe, to focus on the future in a positive, resourceful way, problem solving. If this happens, what am I going to do? How am I going to react? Getting some exercise, getting rid of those potentially harmful stress hormones that linger around for too long, and then producing more hormone, the epinephrine, or sorry, the good stuff, there's those good feelings in your brain, right? We can do all this stuff. It's just a matter of making the decision, change some of the lifestyle factors. Okay, I'm just going to pause very quickly. Questions? Okay. Good. Okay, I know I'm talking in a really fast pace. I'm trying to cram a whole day into an hour here. I just want to give you the very basics. So let's talk about resilience. Now, when it comes to resilience, there's a certain personality type that, again, is statistically different in terms of how they manage stress. They are more resilient than the other personality types. So you've probably all heard of the A-type personality, and they tend to be very tightly wound, right? They're very goal-driven, they're very performance-driven. They will walk over their grandmother's grave to achieve something and not apologize for it. They want to get stuff done, high pressure. So very stressed type of personality type. Then you've got the B-type, more laid back and relaxed. They get stuff done for sure, but it's through others, it's with others, and they tend to manage stress a lot better. Now, the third type is the C-type, it's a lesser known type. And C-type is the most resilient of all personality types. It takes the best of the A-type and the best of the C-type. The best of the A-type being goal-driven and performance and achievement. The B-type is more relaxed, more chill, doesn't get caught up in the thick of thin things, we'll say. Right? Now, the C-type personality, it stands out for three C words, right? I'm going to give you three C words that defines the C type. The first is control. Now, when I talk about control, I'm not talking about the need to control others or the environment. I'm talking about an internal locus of control, an internal locus of control. And it's that belief that I can influence situations. I can change things that aren't working for me. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'll figure it out. It's an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control, where I believe the control is outside here and things happen to me. And what can I do? I have no choice. I have no options. And that, to be honest, why people might seek out psychologists or counselors or coaches is because they feel they're out of options. And sometimes just chatting with someone can help them realize that, hey, there are options. There are ways of dealing with this stuff. And it gets them up and going again, right? And that it can be as simple as that, right? So that internal locus of control. So control is our first C of the 3C words. The second one is commitment. They have a sense of commitment to achieving things that are important to them. Now, I'm not talking about committing to every little thing and every whim that everybody in their lives wants. I'm not talking about that. They'd be stretched way too thin and they just wouldn't be, that'd just be impossible and be overwhelmed. But they are committed to those things that are important to them. So they're aware of their purpose, of why they're here. They're aware of that. And their goals stem from that. And because their goals stem from their purpose, that commitment helps them through the tough times. Because if it was easy, right, you wouldn't need any commitment. You just do it. But it's that sense of commitment. Now, when I work with people, and I know they're committed to something and they're working really, really hard, but for whatever reason, the environment is pushing against them, or there's a constraint around budget, or the decisions being made are hindering their progress, or others are just getting in the way. There's too many blockers, red tape, whatever it might be. They're getting frustrated and they're just like, just quit. It's just not worth it. But if I know that that is their passion and I know they're just venting, I will share this little phrase with them. And, just by repeating it, it helps them refocus. And that phrase is to be committed, but detached. Be committed to the outcome, but detached from all the bullshit and all the rubbish and the emotion and the frustration, all those negative emotions. Detach yourselves from them. Detach yourself from the letdowns that you've had and continue to problem solve. How am I going to get there? Be committed, but detached. Be committed, but detached. Helps them get refocused, recentered to keep going. So the third C is challenge. Challenge. They see problems and issues as challenges. So your C type is the typical person when you go to them and you say, hey, I've got this problem. And they will go, you mean you've got an opportunity, right? And you just want to slap them, right? You just want to say, no, it's been a problem, right, dude? But this is how the C type thinks. They see things as conquerable, right? A challenge is something that we rise to. Yes, it might be a blocker, it might be an obstacle, but we'll figure it out. And they've got that more positive, future-focused, moving forward mentality. When you combine those three things, that sense of control, that sense of commitment, and that sense of challenge, you get someone with a very optimistic mindset. And I'm not talking about that Pollyanna. For me, optimism is about seeing the issue as it is, like we've talked about, not making it bigger, not making it smaller, seeing how you want it to be. And then we've got this thing called in between there, creative tension. Now we just got to get creative. Because if you think about every single problem that the human race has encountered over its millennia, every single one, things have changed. We've figured it out and we've found opportunity in there. I mean, the most recent example is COVID. Before COVID, working from home was, you seek permission maybe. And it was a nice to have every now and again. But now it's a kind of expectation. And it increases the options that we have to having a much more balanced lifestyle. So again, the creativity, how am I going to get from here to here? And start drawing on all of my resources, all of my contacts, all of my experience, all of my knowledge, putting it into this problem to make it the way I want it to be. That's your C type in a nutshell. Now, I know I've spoken really, really quickly, but I'm going to continue to speak really, really quickly. I'm going to give you a wee little exercise I want you to participate in now. We're going to move through it pretty quickly. So if you have a pen and paper, what I want you to do is I want you to jot down an issue or a problem that you're facing at the moment. I'm not going to ask you to share it. This is a personal exercise that you can do right now, right? A problem or an issue you're facing into at the moment. Okay, take a moment to do that. Something that's causing you stress. Okay. Now that you've got that problem written down, I want you to think, I want you to capture the thought that you have about that problem, right? So we can have problems, but it's how we think about those problems that is the key. And if it's still a problem for you, it's likely that the thought that you've got is impeding you from moving forward. So, but that's okay, right? I just want you to be honest. So what am I thinking about this problem? What is my thought around this problem that's a problem for me? It's a problem. What's my thought? Horrific. Now that you've got that, let's do a reading exercise. So call this the ABC model. It's one of the most effective ways I know. It's a little tool out of CBT. It's one of the most effective ways I know for helping us deal with problems in the moment to allow us to move forward. It's really, really powerful. The trick is we have to do it. You have to put it into practice, right? Now, the reason I asked you to write down the problem, write down your thought, is because our thoughts are very fleeting. They come at us very, very quickly. They change up quite quickly. We've got to pay attention to them. When we write them down, it freeze frames it. Now we can deal with it, right? Now we can deal with it. So this ABC model starts off like this. We've got an A, and over here, we've got a C. Now, A stands for activating event or a trigger, something in our environment, or maybe even a thought, right? An internal thought or internal feeling. Trigger is something within us. So A is activating event. C stands for consequence. C is consequence. So when I talk about consequence, I'm referring to an emotion or a behavior. An emotion or a behavior. Now, how most people operate is they jump from A to C. They jump from thought to consequence. So, of course, I raised my voice in that meeting. He kept talking over me all the time, right? So, talking over, I raised my voice. Of course, I hit the horn. The guy just pulled in front of me. He didn't even care. He could have called an accident, right? It's called what we call a reaction, right? Reaction. Now, if you know your alphabet, I've already given you a hint. I've called it the ABC model. You know something is missing. Of course, it's the B. Now, B stands for belief or thought, right? Belief or thought. Now, how most people operate is they go from A to C. They're not aware of the thought that is occurring here. And there is always a thought before we hit the consequence. Always. So if I'm facing a situation where I'm feeling a particular way that I'm not comfortable with, or I'm behaving in a particular way that I'm not happy about, I've got to ask myself, what must I be thinking about this situation to cause me to feel this way? Now, when you ask yourself that question, what must I be thinking about? What do I believe about this situation that caused me to feel this way? Your brain will give you the answer. It'll tell you. Absolutely tell you. And once you capture that thought, write down. Now we can deal with it. Then when we have it, we can go on to the next part of our alphabet. Now, D stands for three things. I'm going to give you those three things. The first one is distance. So we have this situation or this thought, and we want to get away from it, right? So we can go for a walk around the block, or we can just walk away from, if it's a person that's causing the situation, we can create some space. We can move away from it, allow us to calm down, some thinking space. We can create some distance. The second thing that D stands for is distraction. So we can distract ourselves from the thought, distract ourselves from the rumination that might be going around and around and around in our heads. So we can listen to some music, for example. We could go for a walk in nature. We could go for a walk in nature and call a friend. We can talk it through. We can distract ourselves from the incessant turning over of that thought. If we're not happy with how we're feeling or how we're behaving in a certain situation, right? We can take some action here. Now, my favorite approach is this third D. It's my favorite because what it does is it teaches us to think about adversity in a different way. And again, not in a Pollyanna way, but in a controlled way that leads us to more of a problem-solving approach than what we might be getting in the moment. And that is disputation. 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 So how we do disputation, if we go back again to the alphabet, and we're going to go to all the vowels. A, see that come up, okay? A, E, I, O, and U. So if you know the alphabet, this is going to be a breeze for you. You're going to remember it any time that you need to draw on it. So how it works is, I have this particular thought in mind, and I'm not happy about how I'm feeling. I don't want to feel this way, or I don't want it to ruin my day, or I don't want to behave in a particular way. I go to A. And I ask myself, okay, Cillín, what are the alternatives here? What are the alternative thoughts that could also be true? What else could be true in this situation? There is always alternatives. Now, why I know there's always alternatives is because we have a certain model of the world, how we think about the world versus how the world actually is, right? So when our models of the world get out of sync with the reality of the world, that's what it can cause problems for us. When we're not flexible enough to adapt to what's happening in front of us, we're rigid in our thinking. No, it needs to be this way. No, it's this way. It's this way. When in reality, it's changed, right? So we have to adapt. So we've got a subjective view of reality. And as we know, it's subjective. There's many ways of looking at different things, right? There's many ways of reframing or thinking about things. So that's why there's always going to be an alternative way of looking at something. So we capture our original thought and we jot down the alternatives that could also be true here. Again, I'm not talking about making stuff up, but being disciplined enough to think about what also could be true. I don't want to dismiss my original thought. I'm just looking for alternatives. The next step is evidence. So I ask myself, okay, so what evidence have I got around my original thought to make it true? How do I know it's true? Right? One of the most common questions I'll ask a client when they come in and got something going on and they express a particular belief that's causing them pain is, how do you know? How do you know that's true? And it stumps them. Oh, I guess I don't. I said, okay, great. So what else could be true, right? So evidence. What evidence have I got around the original thought? What evidence have I got around the alternatives to make them true? The next one that I've got is implication. Whoops, implication. So what are the implications of this situation? What are the implications of this activating event? So the guy cut me off in traffic. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? What's the implication here? And in some instances, you might recognize straight away that there's no real implication. It's no big deal. It's small potatoes. And you're able to move on. But just consciously being aware of that is really, really powerful. Now, I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to very quickly move through these. The next one is options. So what options have I now got? So I've got a few alternatives, different ways of thinking about things. I've looked at the evidence to determine whether it's true or false. Am I making up a story, maybe? What options have I got to make it the way I want it to be now? How am I going to start moving forward? And the last one is usefulness. So very rarely have I got to this when I use this exercise. Very rarely have I, but on a couple of occasions, the situation, my original thought was pretty spot on. Although there were alternatives, they were kind of limited. The evidence that I had suggested that this was true. It was happening. It was as it was. The implications might have been pretty dire. My options could have been were pretty limited in how I was able to move forward, what I could do. And so when we get to that stage, we ask ourselves, what's the usefulness in me thinking about this the way that I am? And for me, and it's certainly true for others, when you ask your brain that, what's the usefulness of me ruminating and thinking the way that I am? Your brain will come back and go, I guess there is none. And it's like taking a big, heavy, wet wool coat and just letting it fall to the floor. Just a sense of relief is unbelievable. A sense of acceptance about situations is unbelievable. The levels of stress just drop straight away. It's like, what will be, will be. And I've gone, it's not a victim mentality. I've gone through the process. I see the reality as it is, or as close as I can get to it, and I accept it. And it allows me to move on and reduce the stress and allows you to just deal with whatever else is going on. And then the last piece is the last E. So when we work through this, the last E is event revisited. We relook at that original event, relook at that original trigger, and I can almost guarantee you, and guaranteeing anything when it comes to human beings, next to impossible, but I can almost guarantee you that you're going to feel different. It's going to look different to you. Folks, I hope you found this useful. I hope you've had an opportunity to work through this with your original thought around that problem that you had to think about. and you feel differently about it. I hope that's worked for you. In many cases, it certainly has for me and for others. If you haven't had that immediate effect, I know I've gone through it pretty quickly. So maybe go through it in your own time. That is your full day workshop in about 16 minutes. Thank you so much, folks. Really, really appreciate you coming along and sharing your time, your afternoon lunch. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or anything at all, just feel free to reach out to me at any time or through the team at Momentum. They'll pass it on, no doubt. I'm always happy to help. Well, thank you for your very kind comments. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. And I'm going to hang back for a wee little while. If anyone has any questions, they want to chat, that's cool. I'm kind of here. Thanks, Martin. It's good to almost see you again. It's great to have you on the call. Thanks, everybody.